In this episode, John and Stewart sit down with producer, engineer, musician, songwriter, studio owner, and the godfather of Jangle Pop, the one and only Mitch Easter. Mitch has always been and continues to be a staple of the indie rock scene in North Carolina and beyond, first operating out of Drive-In Studio located in his parents' garage, and in 1994 moving to his current studio, the Fidelitorium. Mitch has worked with a laundry list of seminal artists, including R.E.M, Helium, Pavement, Wilco, Ben Folds 5, Pylon, and Polvo. He's also an active musician and writer, releasing music for almost a decade with his band Let's Active, and currently as a solo artist. In this episode, Mitch discusses building, operating, and outfitting his recording studios, the joys and perils of tracking to analog tape, producing the first R.E.M. records, and why it's not always a good idea to fix everything in a recording.
John, does Mitch know your story about your tapes at the airport?
No. So, Mitch, I'll make this really quick. Mixing a record in Spain in my friend Paco's house in the south. We finish. It's the day before Thanksgiving. I have a flight at 7. We missed my flight to get to Madrid to get my connection to fly home. Yeah. So I have in my luggage the tapes because Greg Calby's going to master. So we drive to the next town, the next city to fly out. I book a seat on that. I get to Madrid. I literally have 20 minutes to make my connection or else I'm going to miss Thanksgiving. So I'm like, fuck it. I'll leave the bag. I'll get it. They'll send it to me at one point. I get on my flight. Last person. They actually opened the door for me again and let me on. That's how late I was. I get home. 2 days later, don't hear anything about the tapes. 3 days later, I get an email from the band. Somebody found their tapes in the garbage at the airport. So somebody stole my bag, went through everything, nothing to keep really, threw everything in the garbage at the airport, and some guy was cleaning up. And, you write the name of the band on the reels.
Yeah.
So it's like his favorite band. There's reels of tape with his favorite band's name. So he goes on Facebook and he messages, I found some reels of tape of yours in the garbage at the airport in Madrid. And literally they're like, did you hate us that much that you just dumped the tapes in the garbage?
Mixed by Johnny and Yellow.
It took a while to walk that back. But yeah. We ended up, Greg mastered from the files. I mean, they got their tapes back, but they didn't have time to send them to Greg. But, dude, that was a nightmare. And we missed the flight. There was nothing I could do. I had to get home.
I mean, just think, if those had been like thumb drives or something, they would definitely have not appeared on, Facebook or anywhere else.
Good point.
Except garbage.
Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing about tapes being big is really kind of useful, because you don't lose them,
So, Mitch, your studio's down in North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
And, John, you've worked down there a bunch, right?
Yeah, even before we moved here, I would come down for bands that I knew from around the area. But Mitch is like, Mitch, you're like an hour and a half away from Raleigh, right?
Right. It used to be an hour, but with today's traffic, an hour and a half, yes.
It's just far enough that we can stay. You can stay there. Mitch has got the guest house. There's a bedroom above the studio, which is I prefer staying anyway, and it's great. It's a great scenario, and there's plenty of room. There's you can walk around, and the room sounds great, honestly. And Mitch, I got to tell you, so much fun when now we know each other a few years now, but it was so great. Stewart. Mitch is like, you should try this mic on the bass drum head, the outside. And I tried it, and it was great. And then Mitch recommended I use these Sennheisers on the bass drum inside and the toms. And I'd never used them before. They sounded, but it was so nice to be able to just not use the normal shit I do.
Right.
And just like, what is Mitch? Well, it's like WWMD. What would Mitch do?
That's good. That's a shirt. The thing for us was that, I started at the very humble garage level, and just kind of sort of stayed there, It's like we didn't have any big Neumann microphones, but which you're supposed to have in a real studio. Right. But we kept making records anyway, and it's like after a while, it's like I kept putting off that purchase, and it sort of doesn't matter. I was like, I really love equipment, but I'm also really in love with the fact that you can use this thing that didn't cost a lot and be really happy with the results. I don't want to overdo it with the humble thing, but actually I love the humble thing because you can afford it and not worry about it so much.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But also, the humble thing sounded great. Like, I'm really psyched
Yeah.
on my bass drum sound, the toms. I went out and bought 3 of those fucking Sennheisers.
Exactly, it's crazy. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. If it works, then yeah.
Ever since I've known you, you're still into the consoles. Like, now you've got that Neotech, that's great. But you had that really awesome German console when I first started working there. What was that called?
ABE, which stood for something
ABE.
something German. And I don't have a Neotech, I have an AMEC.
An AMEC, I'm sorry, Angela.
Right.
Is it Angela?
Right. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Well,
sorry.
they're all the same, really.
No, but I like the Neotechs too. But I tracked on your console and it was great. It was like a great setup.
I think it sort of hits the right note, of simplicity and complexity at this point, I mean, when it was made,
Yeah.
Things were getting more complicated really quickly. So that made it like a sort of midline console. But apparently those are now one of the more well-liked AMECs because they do sound good. And, that you can get a little you can get fancy with the routing, but you don't have to, it's kind of perfect for my degree of wanting to think about that.
Yeah, and I think you kept it simple for me, right? Because I had never worked on the console. Because I just remember, honestly, like, we got set up and then I started working and I never, like, I was there 7 or 8 days. I never had to call you and be like, hey, something's not working. You know what I mean? I cruised along for, the whole session and didn't really have any issues.
Well, that's because you're one of the top names. The top names never have to call tech, assistants.
That is not true, dude. That's because your shit works tight.
We try, but it's an ongoing challenge.
When you were saying you were starting out, Mitch,
Yeah.
when you started out, did you start out as an engineer producer or as a musician? Or both?
Mainly a musician, I mean, I'm like so many people. I'm of the TAC generation, right? So when the TAC 4-tracks came out in like '72 or whatever, my friend Chris Stamey got one, and we just went to the basement and never came out of the basement for a year and a half. But that was to serve us writing songs and playing music, and of course that's the story of a lot of people. And then when you have a real studio that's open to the public, you have a way of sort of never playing again. But I kept trying to keep playing. So, when I was first recording bands, I really didn't think about it at all in terms of like my role, except that I just had been around this stuff and liked it and been thinking about it, and I thought I can be helpful, And so when I would get credited as a producer, I was like, what? I really wasn't thinking about it. And I like to think that I always came at it from the band angle. But, doing the studio was definitely partly selfish. It's like, I really like this. I want to do it myself. I saw how expensive it was to go into studios, like especially the old studios. So I wanted to do something, that was lower budget. But by the time I started the real studio, I was thinking a little bit highfalutin. So I thought I have to have a 2-inch machine, which will distinguish me from the half-inch 8-track scene out there, which I totally respect, but I wanted to be a little fancier. Plus, the pictures inside the Thunderclap Newman record where you can see Pete Townsend and you can see just a little bit of that 3M 8-track, that picture changed my life. And so I needed to have that feeling around me. So that was another huge goal for me, was to have that kind of equipment. So, I started looking into used equipment and stuff like that. So when I started the studio, we had 16-track 2-inch.
Now, that's Fidelitorium.
That was Drive-In Studio, which was in my parents' garage.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And Drive-In lasted until I moved out of the garage 13 years later, which is kind of crazy that we kept working in there that long. After a while I started thinking, this is sort of embarrassing, but then the bands didn't really seem to care. It's like a lot of the stuff that I worked on that is still of interest to people was done in that garage, so that's another reason why I look back at that and I think this totally works. I mean, I love studios, but I also love garages and, your backyard or wherever you do it.
Right.
Yeah. As John was just saying, now you have a tracking room. And how big is the room itself? Like, how big of a band can you get in there?
We have actually had a big band in there, like a jazz band, but that was pretty tight. I mean, I think in square footage terms, it's kind of like RCA Studio B, whatever that is, and it's, I don't know, it's like 30 by 30 main room or something, but it's got a 16-foot ceiling. It was built to be a studio, and
Oh, wow.
it's kind of rock band oriented, but we've done other things in there, but it's mostly kind of bands.
Designed by Wes Show, right?
Right, and I like to say this is Wes let's show serial number one. He had his own studios, but this is the first one he got to build from the ground up. And Wes was just a friend of mine, and so when I was going to do something, I was also, another photo that inspired me a lot was this picture I saw a long time ago. I think it's on one of those area code 615 records, and that guy, Wayne, what's his name? Anyway, who has that place, Cinderella, it looked like sort of a shed, and I thought, yeah, I just need a shed. I need more room, and so I was going to build this concrete block shed, but I thought I should talk to Wes because I knew that Wes was into math and, acoustics, and he just liked all that. He kind of knew what he was doing because his own places always sounded good. And then Wes just came back with this like really nice plan, which was way more ambitious, but we ended up building that because it was like, we have to build this. This is going to be great. And it really did work well. Wes, has gone on to be a really well-known designer, but he was just starting to do that then.
Was it a pre-existing building, or you actually built the building?
No. We built the building, like most of my life, I drive through a town. It's like, that'd be an awesome studio, I just can't help it, And so I was always doing that, but I never actually found one, that I could buy or that would work or whatever, and like if it's commercial real estate, it's instantly like a lot more expensive, so it's like, oh, well. And I used to think that I didn't want to have the studio right by my house, that it was kind of good to go there and then come home, But in the end, we built this behind the house. We have like an 1.5 acre lot, so there's some room back there. And we just built this because I just couldn't find anything, and I'm glad we did because obviously we didn't have to deal with any pre-existing bad geometry or anything like that.
Yeah, nice.
No, it's fantastic. And honestly, super private. When you're in the studio, unless, Mitch or Tammy pop in to say hi, you don't really, there's bamboo, and the band house is like the other way. So at the end of the night, when you're walking to the band house, you're walking away from, the area. So it really, it is great, honestly. And, you're a half a mile up from a Mexican restaurant, a wings place, a bar, a food line. It's really great.
Thank you.
It's super rare, as we all know, that studios get built in, that you get to actually build the structure. Most studios wind up in some building. And so I would assume you had to pour a slab and start from that?
It's on a slab, yeah. We had to build the slab up a little bit because of the terrain, so it's like it's kind of off the ground on one end and sort of right on the ground on the other end. But it's a completely purpose-built building, and Wes's plan worked.
That's great.
And his I've been in a couple of his rooms, and there is a consistency to the way the rooms sound and the layout. So, Stewart, when you were talking about like the occupancy of the studio, I've done 2 guitars, bass, and drums, basic tracks there with like, reference vocals. And the booths are perfect. You know what I mean? Like you could do 2 amps next to each other with a baffle, bass room. The drums sound really great. Mitch is able to put the room mics on a little shelf above, right below the ceiling. And you get a really nice bounce back. When you solo the drum rooms, they really sound great.
So Wes designed it, but obviously he designed it to your needs and the kinds of records you want to make. So
I think so, yeah.
And so you sat with him and said, look, I need a tracking room that I like to be this size and some booths and a control room that's comfortable enough to fit so many people. And
yeah, kind of, but I mean, like I was saying, I had sort of the vaguest sort of thing that I went to him with, but he knew what I did. I mean, he was in the studio biz himself. He was still doing sessions all the time back then too, so we were kind of doing a lot of the same kind of clientele, these sort of non-metal rock bands, not that metal bands would be much different, but anyway, the point is he kind of knew what I did, and I think that RCA's Nashville size is just sort of a good size, so that was sort of the square footage notion. But really the layout of it was kind of him, and I guess we talked about it some, but really his first draft got to be 80% of what we built. He just knew that some of the details changed. Like, for example, around the time we built this, which was right at the end of the 90s, like our first session was in 2000, RPG had started offering the diffusers in different materials besides the wood, and the thing that was really intriguing to me was the fact that they were making them with concrete blocks, and it was the same pattern as the wooden ones, but it's just bigger, so it's practical because it's what matters is the ratios, and so it doesn't even matter what the material is, and I thought that's really cool. And I should say that right before that, the studio had been in my house, like I was coexisting with the sessions for about 4 years, which was demanding, and I think the Cosmos sent us special sessions to really drive that point home, So, I would find weird things in the house. Like this is an old house. It's got wooden floors, There was one session like where after the session, there was like a gouged out place in the floor where the one guy stamped his foot all the time when he played guitar. It's like, I want as much concrete as I can have. I want the slab to not budge and wobble. And so the fact that the diffuser blocks were concrete too was like, hey. So, the big walls in the main room are these diffuser blocks, which are cool looking, and that allowed us to build like with parallel walls and stuff that would normally be a problem. So that was a kind of an evolution from the materials that happened with the design that worked out great because it was cheaper actually to build because we could use these acoustic blocks.
That's an easy room to track drums in because you bring up the room mics and it's just there.
Yeah,
so it's really cool. And the monitors are great, Stewart. Like listening in the control room, it's like really pleasurable. You can have the bigs on, but low, and they sound great.
So the bigs are soffitted?
They are.
Are they ATCs? They're not ATCs.
No, they're old. They're Uri 813s.
Right.
A lot of the stuff that I bought was stuff that I kind of dreamed about. Right. So when I was coming up and really thinking about the real studio world, that series of Uris that were based on the Altex, were like the studio speakers. So of course I wanted those. But I bought them later when they were out of fashion, and I had them when the studio was in the house. I was doing this heavy band, and I thought this was going to be the answer because this is what all those heavy records were mixed on, But if you don't put those things in soffits, they sound like nothing, and they're huge, It's like, oh, what a disappointment, So we knew we were going to do some soffit something or other down there, and I didn't even dream it would be the 813s, but I already had them, and it's like we stuck them in those holes in the wall, and they came to life. And I really like them. They're completely out of fashion these days. But it's one of those things. If you get it sounding good on them, you're fine. And they, they are particularly good on like jazz and stuff with horns and stuff, and kind of not as good on like really dense guitars. But for the tracking level, when you just need to play something loud for the band, they're great. And you can mix on them. You just have to readjust your head a little bit to that peculiar Uri thing. But I still like them.
Do you have a near field preference?
Well, the near fields that I've got right now, which I really like, and I like to be a little bit contrary, right? So I've always had a lot of things down there. Lately, I'm using these JBL 530s that are free. I don't know if you've seen these, but like JBL now is really weird. They're part of Harman, which is part of Samsung, and it's all this like soundbar world now, But they have different lines of speakers, and this guy that I know who's a smart guy was mentioning these to me. And he was talking about this crazy thing that JBL does now where everything goes on sale like every couple of months. And when it goes on sale, it's marked down to like, a fourth of what it actually cost. So these are cool looking weird speakers with the sort of big flared horn thing around the tweeter and then a woofer in the bottom. So I got them for $289 and I really love them. They're great. They normally cost $599, which is still free for studio monitors, but I swear I like them as well as anything I've had in that room. They get loud, they've got enough bass, they got enough top, they don't sound weird, they don't sound like I have these great 80s 4401 JBLs that we like mixed an R.E.M. record on, and they're great and everything, but these 530s really sound a lot better than those, they just They're a really good design, and I have them connected to, I think this helps too, I have them connected to one of those shit amplifiers, the Agir, which is their Class A amp, and the Agir and the 530s is a low-cost, really good-sounding system. I think the only thing I've heard in there that I liked better was when these guys brought in these PMCs with this modified Adcom amp, and that was really great sounding, but that cost at least 10 times as much as, my JBLs, and I think for day in, day out, they're really good near fields, for mixing and stuff, I mean, they kind of do what NS10s did without hurting your head,
Yeah.
Right.
So, John, this is a question for you in relation to that studio and other studios as well. When you walk into a new room,
I get my little flash drive and I put up the Dinosaur Jr. song "Get Me" from Where You Been, and I listen to it on the speakers, the big and smalls, because I know what's right about it and I know what's wrong about it. And then I know where the bass should be. It's not that the song is perfect. I know what's right and what's wrong about it.
Right.
So that's what I do. I do that all the time now. You know me, I travel so much at different places. I'd go nuts if I didn't do that.
Right.
I really
well,
would.
and you know, you really can get used to some pretty crazy things. I mean, I will say I have not really mixed much on the 530s, but what I have mixed on in the last couple of years are Amphion's, the 115s, which I feel like I can really trust, and I really like them.
And are they in the Fidelitorium, or are they in your room?
They're in my little shed.
Gotcha.
Which is where which was where I've been mixing everything the last couple of years, because
right.
The shed is got a pretty good control room in it, and the studio is sort of like, you know, for bookings, you know, for everybody, and so there's lots of times there's tracking going on in there, and I'm mixing in my little shed.
Do you still work on tape, or?
Not much. You know, I thought what would happen is I thought people would keep mixing the tape, you know, but once it kind of went computery, it just all died, you know. And every now and then we have people that are interested in it. We've got some tape machines, you know, and sometimes we will mix to them and people are like, oh my God, and other people are like, they don't hear it, you know, so whatever, you know. I mean, both of those positions are totally legitimate, right? I mean, I think when you A-B things, you can really hear the differences, but I will say that when we built the studio, I thought, this is great. I can have all my equipment in here. But then I realized, no, I don't really want it to feel cluttered, you know, and I filled it up really fast, you know. So I've got this sort of purge mentality every now and then. So the thing that I just purged was the 24-track tape machine, which I brought up to my shed because nobody used it. You know, it got used for tape transfers, you know. So I thought, I'm going to put that in my shed, and I can still do tape transfers, but my goal for this next year is to make a record, you know. So I'm going to record that on this damn tape recorder because I want to use that thing, you know.
You're going to do a Mitch record?
Yes.
Great.
And I'm going to do it on that tape machine because it ought to get used, you know, and I'm used to them, you know, but I understand how bands that have never worked that way are always shocked at some things, you know, but
I feel like with a lot of the younger artists, specific artists with tape, it's just not feasible because you know, you can't do 20 takes of a song using tape because you have to just, you know, you don't have that many reels. It's $400 a reel. Or I've had certain bands who like bring in a half-finished song and then you have to figure it out. And you can't just constantly record and do edits. You know what I mean? And if you're, I find with tape, if you're well-rehearsed and seasoned and you know how to do it, you can track. You know what I mean? But with the other aspects of it, tape is not helpful. You know, it's
right.
Not,
I mean,
as much as I love how it sounds. Don't get me wrong, I love how it sounds. Yeah. But
well, sometimes there's a band that wants to put their toe in the water, and it works for them. Like they love it actually because it speeds up some things. They're ready. You know, they're ready to think that way and all that stuff. But if they're not, it's just an obstacle.
Yeah, it's tough for sure. And I also noticed that the younger kids who work in studios don't really understand the nuance of alignment and stuff like that. So unless you're like our age, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, the guy came in 2 weeks ago and aligned. And I was like, well, here's the reel of tape we're working off of. And he's like, oh, what does that matter? And it was like, no, you don't understand.
Yes, there's all kinds of sad things. You know, I've had bands show up with these prized reels of 456 from the ultimate sticky era, and they're so psyched to use it. And it's like, we're not going to use that. You know, that stuff's going to have to be baked, and then it'll work for about a day. So no, you know, that kind of stuff. It's just sort of sad, you know, in a way. But you know, there's still a way to do it, and I think when it counts, it's great, and it's just one of the ever expanding range of things we can do.
John and I many years ago made a record which will go unnamed, but we had an assistant who was basically on angel dust the whole time and aligned the machine to like plus 12, right? And we did the whole album like, bam! And even with that faulty calculation, the record sounded great. So,
see, there you go. There's one of the magic aspects of it.
Yeah.
And that was the Roy Thomas Baker thing, right? Didn't Roy Thomas Baker record it plus, you know, 200 on these Stevens tape machines that had heat sinks on the back of the heads? You know, you have to love that, right? It's so kind of savage.
Yeah. Was he plus 9 or plus 12? I think he was. He was plus 9, right?
I thought it was 12, and I think this is before those level. I think this was like in the era of +6
Yeah.
tape too, so it was really,
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so forgiving.
pushing it.
I'm hoping
Yeah.
that's the case
God.
too as I look at this TAC, because whenever I get loud, the meter goes right over. But it should be fine.
At a certain point in the garage, is that where you started working with like R.E.M. and stuff like that, or was that more the house
Yeah.
or Fidelitorium?
Oh no, that was the garage. The garage was 1980 to 1993.
So were
That's
you
amazing.
were you in Athens when you started with them?
No, I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and that's
Yeah,
where we did all that
he's
stuff.
North Carolina.
But I
Yeah.
thought REM they started making records in Athens. I guess they came to you.
They are from they're from Athens, and they had recorded before me at a place in Atlanta or Smyrna, Georgia, called Bombay, but they never used that. It was like their demo, I think. And even when they came to me, it was meant to be a demo session, because in those days, what you did is you made your cassette and you gave it to the clubs, So they came up for a weekend, but they came here because they had started playing in New York City, and they were staying with Peter Holzapfel, who's a friend of mine, and they were saying to him that when they got home, they're going to go record somewhere, and he told them about my place, which had started about 10 minutes before that, So that was great. And so thanks to him, they came in, and we did this session that was like their first single. But that was in the garage. It was really early for me in the studio biz. Before that, it was just the TAC 4-track stuff.
How soon into working with them did you realize what you were dealing with?
Well, I really liked them. I thought they were great.
Right.
But I thought I was very fortunate that I was recording people that I'd liked, just by chance. I was lucky. And I remember thinking, like, okay, here's a proper band. They got everything going on here, and they were very good. They played really well, and it was a fun session. Their attitudes were fantastic and all that. But as far as like them going straight to the top, by then I was already old enough to not think that was ever going to happen,
Yeah.
because,
Right.
Yeah.
there's just so much chance about everything, no matter how good you are, right? But I think the thing that I always remember was that, I was impressed at how much attention that little single got, and I don't really know why it did. But I think there was a lot of right place at the right time with everything, and that song just connected with people, and it must have connected with rock writers, Everything in those days that I was around seemed to have to do with a key person in New York who would talk about you, whether it was at Trouser Press or New York Times. It always seemed to go through New York back then, So
Right.
they got the New York people liking them right away. I guess they were starting to play there, but... So then I did that EP with them called Chronic Town, and that did pretty well. But it was really after we did the first album, and all this stuff was happening pretty fast. When they signed with IRS, and they made that Murmur record, which was their first record, and Don Dixon worked on that one with me, and we did that
Oh,
at
yeah.
Reflection
Love Don.
in Charlotte. And Reflection was a great studio, and it really had, the record had a cool sound. And but anyway, I had the tapes. I was going to New York to take them to our friend Greg Kelby, and these people that I knew were on tour, and I got a ride with them in their van, to go to New York, because that's where they were going next. And I played them the tape and said, "We just finished this thing. Do you want to hear it?" And everybody was like, "Wow, I love that. What that?" People just freaked out about this cassette, and it was like, "Oh, really? Cool." Because when you're working on something, you're doing your best, but at the end of it, you just have no idea anymore. At the end of everything, you're sort of worried about the stuff you're worried about, and then if you get that kind of reaction, then you can stop worrying. So that was kind of beautiful, and that made me really think that, okay, this band connects with people, but it was kind of funny because, I don't think the record company wanted them to work with us, and a couple of the guys came by the studio while we were making that record, and they were pretty grumpy, and then they were disappointed that it only sold 240,000. And I'm like, 240,000 is pretty good, isn't it? And that was like the first run,
Yeah.
But the great thing was that then I think it was Rolling Stone Record of the Year or something like that. So I felt like, okay, that's our revenge. And then, that record went on to be, as I like to say, the dark side of the moon of the New Wave era, right? Because, that record is probably still in print and it still sells. So, we were right.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Was that the first? Because I know you have a long history with Don Dixon. You guys was that the first project you did together, or were you guys pals before that?
Well, I met him in 1970, I think, when his band and our band were playing at the same, hippie outdoor festival rock thing, and so I just knew who he was, and I would cross paths with him now and then. He's older than me a little bit, and we didn't see each other all the time. But anyway, when I started my little place up in 1980, he was very helpful to me, and he brought sessions in, so I started working with him in my garage place on some things before that. Literally, it's only like a year before the R.E.M., but you know how it is in those golden days. Everything's happening fast.
And you would co-produce, but did you co-engineer, or were you engineering? How did that work?
It was really loose. I think both of us can do it more or less. I mean, he's 100 times smarter than I am, but like I think I'd do some engineering and he'd do some engineering, and he'd say, "Why don't we double that bridge there?" And I'd say, "Why don't we add a piano?" You know what I mean? I don't remember what we did in terms of roles very much because
That's
it was
great.
really
Right.
fluid. It was great. I mean, I love that. That was the thing that was so great about records like that is that, it was like 3 weeks done, no revisions. I mean, the word revision didn't exist,
Yeah.
And then it comes out, really quickly. So, that's the way that record was. And so I remember it clearly, but in a sort of general way because we were going fast. I think the most luxurious thing we did, which was really fun, Reflection was one of those studios that had the big studio monitors out in the main room too, which always sound bad, but they're kind of fun, So I believe they had EV sentries bolted to the wall. And you know how people would like bolt everything to the wall back then? It's like, how do they do that, So they had these huge EV sentries, and we made a copy of the sequence, and then we would try to make a sequence on the copy, knowing that we would change it, and we'd go out there and turn off all the lights and lie on the floor and let the record play, and then we'd go back in and change the order by, undoing the edits and reassembling it, and then going back and lying down on the floor again. That was like the most luxurious part of the whole record, because the rest of the time it was just nonstop, activity.
At that point, were you doing Let's Active, or was Let's Active a little bit later than the first R.E.M. experience, or?
Well, right when I had lived in New York for a little while, and when I moved back down here and started the studio was when that R.E.M. session happened, when they came in and made the single pretty much right shortly thereafter I'd moved back. So I didn't have a band, and I was freaking out about it because I don't have a band. I'm getting old. I'm 25. Oh, my God, And so I felt really, really, like, worried about time, And so within that year, I think we got Let's Active started, But I had met R.E.M. just before that, and they very generously let us open for them at the 688 Club. So our first show was, I think it was Friday the 13th in November '81 at the 688 in Atlanta. So just a little bit after when I had met R.E.M. was when we started that band.
When I think about like that style, Jangle Pop, right? Is that the phrase, or is that like not the phrase? I forget.
That's the phrase that you see a lot, yes.
I always think like, oh, Mitch invented it, or you were like on the forefront, or you know what I mean? Because I just feel like whenever that phrase comes up, there's something about there's you. You're always like, I'm always thinking about you.
Well, thank you. I did read that I personally invented indie rock, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't even remember. I mean, I don't remember the day I did that. I mean, it just happened, I guess. But
so you're the fault. Oh, my budget's dropped, right?
Yep.
It's your fault. Oh my.
Yeah, all those like Napster guys and stuff, they read about me and they're like, "Fuck, we can take this all the way, man. We can take the money out of it top to bottom."
Hey, so Mitch, having lived in New York, was there, like, you're leaving a big sort of hub? We know where all the recording hubs are in the United States or in the world, and you chose to not be there. Was that an artistic decision, or was that a lifestyle decision?
That plus economic decision. My the reason why I was in New York partly was because my dad worked in New York a lot. He worked for Western Electric, and that was one of these companies that would transfer their people around all the time. And he got sent to New York like 3 times or something, and he knew it'd just be for like a couple of years, so we never moved there. But by the time I was finishing college, like everybody I knew moved to New York because the punk scene was incredibly appealing to all of us, and right. So everybody moved there. So it's like, well, I better move to New York. And I mean, I was really familiar with it and all, so it was great. I met so many people that were, still friends, and also some of the first studio clients, But the thing that freaked me out was just to realize that, everything is just sort of more serious. It's going to cost more for rent. It's going to cost more for construction. Everything's just revved up. And I thought, I still want to play in my like teenage rock band if possible. But the sense of heavy overhead started to kind of freak me out. And I started thinking, well, you don't have to do this here. I was a little bit worried that we would never get anything cool at our place, But the great thing, it actually worked out really well, because when I moved back in 1980 was when college radio just like came to life as the force it was for a long time thereafter, and still kind of is, Like these little sleepy college stations that would just put on any old LP were suddenly these sort of statement stations that were playing, UK punk and all this kind of stuff, And so it made it like not as localized. And then it like also around the same time, like these lesser areas became actually really interesting to people, like Akron, produced all these great bands, and it was so much that you were hearing about Lawrence, Kansas, the Lawrence, Kansas scene. Right. It's like, wow. Yeah. So I figured, okay, we're not that far off the map. It's not really going to be fatal now, because I really almost did this 2 years earlier in Winston-Salem, and I chickened out, not for economic reasons, but for this town is completely dead reasons, But like by 80, it was not so dead down here. The punk clubs were popping up everywhere, and even the stupid clubs would have the new wave bands on Tuesday night when they didn't have to worry about you, So all that was like crucial to our studio actually making sense,
Right.
And then we got, some of my friends from New York that were on tour or whatever would come down here and record, and they just kind of like being in the exotic wastelands of the South, So,
Right.
it all kind of worked, but it wouldn't have worked a few years earlier, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I think if I'd had the money, to just to build this like fancy studio and really go for it, I would have. But I didn't even really quite want to be fancy. I wanted to be kind of, well, indie for lack of a better word,
Yeah, no, it works. No, it's great.
Were there years where you had to go and make records in other cities, wherever the artists were, or did you always maintain bands coming to you?
I did travel some, and I always liked doing it. I really, I didn't have any sort of training in this, and I didn't work with anybody, which would have probably been great if I'd worked with like a real person. I'm not saying Don Dixon isn't a real person, but he's more like me in his attitude. But like if I'd been like the tape op at a big studio and been, hazed and everything, that might have been good for me. But I'd always just done it myself, and I was pretty comfortable doing that. But when I started going to other places, I was sort of intimidated by the idea of doing that. But then I realized that it was great, and then I really liked doing it. As long as there's somebody that can tell you where things are, they're all kind of the same. But, I did such low budget sessions that we needed to be tracking within 20 minutes of the van pulling up, it felt like. So I was always worried about that going into other places. But anyways, most of the big places have a staff, or they used to, so whatever. But yeah, I did do that some, and I didn't do it like John, but I've worked in England a few times and California several times, and other cities, Atlanta, New York, but I always had the studio, so I think I was associated with the place quite a bit too. So most of the stuff I've done in my own place, but yeah, and then Reflection in Charlotte, I did tons of stuff there. That's just sort of down the road too.
Right.
But that was Reflection was always the real studio to go to back when mine was in the garage, because they had a big room and they had 24 tracks, so yeah, it was just a better place.
And I assume, beginning as a musician, you're starting out as a player, that you were also involved in songwriting.
Yeah, I didn't record very many bands that wanted me to help write their songs, but I could help make up a part if they wanted me to. I was never very pushy about that kind of stuff. If I'd been smart, I would have been. I would have. Is it Mutt Lange that has a writing credit on everything? He probably really does write the parts, but that's a smart thing to do. The ultimate, of course, would be Dr. Eugene Landy, who got credits on everything that Brian Wilson wrote for a few years. That's like
really? Wait, he was a psychologist.
Yeah, well, he's been completely
therapist.
like. Yeah, he's also a hustler. It's really funny. He was
How
awful.
did I not
but
know
anyway,
that? That's insane.
Yeah, well, there's just a short period there, and I think some of Brian's people said you got to get this guy away from you, But
Wow.
But yeah, so I never really. I was really stupid about the business part of it. I was never like, let me get some credits here. I think I could write a better chorus for you. I could have done that with good or bad motives, right? But anyway, most of the bands that I worked with are very self-contained, and they kind of don't want that, So you have to be sort of gentle with those suggestions.
Right. As a producer, you're referring to as a producer. I was talking more about your own songwriting for yourself, your own bands. Is that something you've always done?
I've always tried, and I sort of got to where I could actually do it about the time I got the studio going. The songs that I wrote as a teenager are pretty unlistenable by any normal standard, But eventually they started sounding sort of like other people's songs enough to where I could let other people hear them.
Right. But when you're going to go in to make a record now, are they
I am.
Is it a record of you? But it's a record of your songs?
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of songs that my friends have done that I wouldn't mind putting on there, but yeah, I like to write songs and I like to record them. I love that whole, it's kind of obnoxious, the one-person band thing. I mean, the people that do that make a lot of records that I like, you know.
Like Todd Rundgren.
Right, and Stevie Wonder, you know. I love the way both those guys play drums, for example, and they're not officially drummers, you know, so I love all that.
Yeah.
Now, would you start with drums, or do you start with a click and guitar, or what's the easiest way for you to get going on it?
Clicking a guitar, that's a scratch guitar, you know, and then I'll play drums, and then the drums, of course, are not going to feel the same as the click, so then I turn the click off and do all the overdubs to the drum take. And the great thing is that when the studio was in the house here, we would track upstairs, and the console was downstairs, because there was no way we were getting that Neve console up to the second floor, you know. So all the tapes that I made in the years I had that over here, you know, I had to hit record and run fast, and you can hear my footsteps getting louder as I get closer to the drums, you know, and then I'm at the top of the steps, and then I have to hope. And the thing is, this is where tape is great, because it's like, and nobody would be here, right? So it's like, don't fuck up. You know, nobody can punch you in,
right?
And you got to go all the way back down those steps, so don't fuck up, you know. And that was really useful, right? So I'm used to working that way. It's really stupid, and a lot of times on the way to the drums, I'm like cursing myself out just like that. But I think that puts a certain vibe into the session, you know, even if it's just me, you know. But I'm so used to doing that. It's like on these T-Acts, you know, I never had like the remote or anything, so I got really good at punching in vocals, you know, on the front of this thing, you know, and I don't know, I'm used to it, you know. I realize it's dumb, but I kind of like it too, you know.
I don't think it's dumb. I think it's awesome. I mean, that's also, you know, we literally, I sit with records where people identify like 50 pick scrapes on the acoustic to fix, and then I listen to like Rod Stewart, Every Picture Tells a Story, where he comes in the breakdown early and they just leave it. He goes like, and it's like, what? There's nothing wrong with that. It's so much fun. And even Bella loves Chris Stapleton. And our friend Vance Powell, who's wonderful, he gave Bella an Easter egg on Kentucky Whiskey, I think it is, or whatever, Tennessee Whiskey, whatever the fucking song is. It's cool. Yeah. But he fucks up in the guitar solo, and he laughs because the vocals live. They fixed the guitar solo, but they left the laugh in. And when she got that Easter egg, she told all her friends. Everybody was freaking out. That shit's fun.
I mean, surely it's probably a little more fun for us because we just like that, you know, and plus, you know, you spend so much time on this sort of boring perfectionism, you know, so when this works, it's, but I also think it works on a lot of people because it's like there's a human there, you know, it's like there's a limit to it, but, you know, I think there's a false intro on Immigrant Song, too, which is great at the very end, because he goes, it's like, so now you better stop, you know, and it's like, I'm sure that's a false entrance. And then there's that dead note in the middle of Hot Blooded, the solo, which I really applaud Mick Jones for leaving in. I don't think he meant for that to happen. And it's awesome, you know, it's like, so I mean, you know, I love all that. And I think, you know, people like Todd Rundgren who are sort of ultimate with so many things, you know, he appreciated that too. You know, he told me that for those records, I mean, you know, he made the console those things were done on too. He soldered it together. I don't know what the building blocks were. He told me that the sound of that stuff was he on Canal Street, you know, when there were all those stereo stores down there, he went down there and bought like 20 cheap graphic equalizers, you know, so every channel had one of these like maybe like car audio graphics on it, you know, so that was the sound of that record. Everything got equalized to hell and back with those graphic EQs, but the result is fantastic, you know, that sort of
amazing,
super distinctiveness of the sound is my favorite thing about records. I mean, perfect records are awesome, but in another way, perfect records sort of sound like commercials, you know, so it's like, if we're in like this kind of band, rock world, auteur kind of world of music, you know, those moments of the human are the best parts.
Yeah. And for me, like I could, and you were talking about Mutt Lange, but I, you know, appreciate those records too, even though they're so full on. And, you know, I worked with Bill Whitman on the Outfield record, which was kind of, I won't say an homage to those kind of records, but that's what they were going for, a really big layered thing. And they did it analog, 48 track. So I love you know, I do really love those records too, but, you know, nothing emotionally, I just get touched by the realness of music. You know what I mean? The realness. And for me, that just makes me smile. You know what I mean? I may be in awe listening to, like, you know, Back in Black or whatever, like being like, whoa. But like I said, emotionally, I love the realness of stuff for sure.
Well, you know,
but it's true. I mean, I like it all. You know what I mean? It's like whatever works.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot fault, you know, a Def Leppard record, you know, or anything Mutt Lange does. You know, it's just a different thing. You know. And I do like learning that apparently he's super nice, because I know somebody that worked with him and she loved every minute of it, even though the many days that they were working, it was only about the hi-hat. That's what she said anyway. So I just can't imagine shifting to that time frame, you know, but I admire those who do.
There's a legendary story. I don't know if it's true or not, but like after one of the Def Leppard records, he had to go to like a place to stay for a year because he was so insane from. It's like a urban legend or a local legend.
Oh right,
He needed to go to a place to get away and kind of get help, get mental help.
Yeah, it seems like maybe you wouldn't listen to any music whatsoever. You know, you would not allow it.
Yeah.
You know, talking about Todd and Stevie Wonder, those records are, in my mind, they're not sonically perfect and they're not performed perfectly, but they are some of the greatest records you'll ever hear. And I'm not like maybe some of the imperfection is what's attractive about that, or that the humanness comes through. But there is there's something that I don't think, you know, you really lose with technology if you in fact did come up working in a certain method. And I'm curious moving forward how people who've not grown up in that world are going to, like, where's music going to go if people don't have that experience. Not to say it's, you know, great things are not going to come up in the future, but it's just it's an interesting thing that we are sort of in that last generation.
That's true. I guess the thing that's kind of cool right now is that, you know, there is an appreciation going forward and backwards with a lot of the kids, you know, that they may not get these old ways and haven't done it, but a lot of them do appreciate it, as opposed to other times when it's all seen as garbage. Like I was in England one time in the 80s, and this video guy was talking about recording, and he just announced to me that you really can't make a record without an SSL. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that, you know. But he was a real believer in whatever was in, you know, Au Courant, and that's kind of silly. So right now, you know, we've got, of course, the kids think that tape means that you're going to sound like Led Zeppelin or whoever they like, and of course it has nothing to do with that really. But the fact that they're open to checking it out is kind of cool. I know. I mean, I struggle with the old stuff because, of course, I have an affinity for it. You know, it's like, it seems like we're never going to run out of Hammond organs, right? But they stopped making them, the real ones, you know.
Yeah.
But it's very slow, and I guess, you know what I mean? They haven't made a tone wheel organ since '74, but you still see them everywhere, you know. But, and I don't want to over-glamorize the old stuff and all, but, you know, like I've done, every time I do a tape transfer, which is what I was doing yesterday all day, there's something kind of magic about it, you know, because I picture how it was done and all that stuff, you know. There's less to picture. So my view about sessions and recording for what I like, you know, it's like, and I like to work by myself, and I love the bedroom recording and all that kind of stuff, but it's never as good for the photos, right? So, like, some of the best session pictures ever are those electric Dylan sessions, right? Like, whoever took those pictures are great pictures, and they're in a real studio, you know? So, but what if Dylan was like now, and he did all that in his house? You would have no pictures, you know? I mean, the fact of the public space and the way of working being a little slower so that the people really are hands-on is kind of magic. I don't think people are going to want to lose all that, you know? But yeah, what it's going to mean in practical terms, who knows?
Yeah, but the cover, is it either maybe the back cover of Something Anything? Isn't it Todd sitting in his basement with the tape machine next to him? Is that
there's
right?
a picture. There's like the picture with the curtains, and there's a tape machine. And it's the back of him. That picture.
Yeah, that's right. That's
a great picture.
But I think Something Anything isn't side 4, the side that is actually the live band, and they just roll, so you hear the banter in between songs. And I think the rest is just him. Correct?
Yeah.
The first 3 sides, I think. That's how I remember the record, but I could be wrong.
You know, one of those, there's two of them right together that are sort of big sprawling things like that. And one of them has the thing that's the little nerdy section about recording problems. Do you remember this? He demonstrates sibilance and overmodulation and stuff, and it's this little, almost like Zappa moment. It's kind of great. It's very nerdy and appealing to a dork like me, But
I know, it's great.
And to think that was a commercial record, that was in Woolworths, and that's so fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Anything had Hello, It's Me, right? I mean, that was like a huge hit for him.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy. I mean, it's kind of amazing how like every time he produced some band, that's when they'd have their hit,
I know.
Yeah.
Hey, did you ever get to see the Nas?
No, I missed them by a few years. I got in there right at Something
You would have been too
Anything.
young.
Yeah. No, I think maybe my older brother was into them. But I then got back to the Nas, would forget all about it a while, and all the flanging and shit like that, and it was so cool. But
those are
I
amazing
went back
records.
for that. Oh, so good. Yeah. Open My Eyes had all the flanging, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, for that to be the first song on the first record by this band that you never heard of was just, what an opening track. I mean, you can't beat it.
Yeah.
Mitch, I just wanted to really thank you for doing this with us, and we're big fans, and I hope you just keep doing what you do.
He has to.
You have to. And indie, what's the new indie? What are you going to come up with next?
Right. It is time to invent a genre.
To invent another genre.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll get back to you when I've got it. Actually, you'll read about
Please
it.
do. Okay.
Yeah.
And Mitch, we can't wait to hear the new record. Have a blast making it.
Thanks.
Hey, if you
thanks
need
so
an
much.
intern, I'm around. If you need an assistant engineer, I'm around.
Okay, well, I'm going to work with the English manner, so it's going to be like pranks all the time. There's going to be like, you're going to come out and your shoes are going to have like weird stuff in them, and as long as that's okay with you.
Fine by me.
All right, guys.
I grew
thank
up in
you
the
so
record
much.
plant.
Thanks,
Mitch.
See you.
Bye,
Thank you,
guys.
Mitch.
Bye, James. Thank you for everything, guys. For extras from the episodes, like playlists, links, and videos, head over to gearclubpodcast.com. Sign up for the newsletter, and come say hi and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Gear Club Podcast. Thanks for listening.
And please, if you like what you hear, let us know and leave a review.
Gear Club Podcast is sponsored by Eventide, and they're running a special promotion just for Gear Club listeners. You can go to store.eventideaudio.com and use the promo code GearClub15 for 15% off your purchase of Eventide products. Some exclusions may apply. Go to GearClubPodcast.com for details. Big thanks to Eventide for their sponsorship and this special promotion.